Barely 1 week since Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu charged citizens to embrace and switch to compressed natural gas, CNG as popularly called, as an alternative to the fuel price hike amidst worries and fears expressed by commuters and commercial bus drivers. Now, this was exacerbated by the recent explosion that occurred in Aduawa, Benin City, the capital of Edo State, injuring multiple individuals. In a swift reaction to supporting the CNG initiative, an investment of $280 million has been announced by the Dangote Group. All the well-meaning Nigerians have hailed the administration's drive to create a conducive environment for the private sector investments and to expand Nigeria's CNG infrastructure to enhance energy efficiency and drive economic growth. Now, here's what some of the experts have said. They've said that the cost of CNG at 250 naira is way too high, that it should be 50 naira per kg or 70 naira per kg. And this is because the country has been flaring natural gas since 1947. Some other thing that they've said is that unlike fuel and a needed refinery, CNG is not imported. So to be exploring this conversation even further, looking at what this will mean, what the implications are, we're joined by the CEO of Mesorvest Energy expert, Tosin Thompson. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right. There have been fears about the safety standards regarding the conversion of CNG. This, of course, has been sparked especially and fueled by the recent explosions. Are these fears founded? And, you know, has any proper investigation been done to confirm that indeed the conversion to CNG is actually safe for Nigerians?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say that the fears are definitely founded. When we talk about gas, when we talk about anything fossil fuel based, the history of other derivatives of fossil fuel, we've seen accidents happen, and then we've seen standards implemented and being adhered to. So when you have the same fears with, especially a relatively new in terms of this scale of execution of a product of this gaseous form, you can't blame the citizens for being afraid. But this is an opportunity really for training and for educating, and I know the government through the PCNG is pushing this initiative, but educating the masses, because CNG is a relatively safe gas compared to the other derivatives like LPG, for instance. CNG is less dense than air, so that when it escapes, it goes right into the atmosphere. Whereas LPG is more dense, because when LPG is leaking and there's a leakage, it actually sticks down. There's an ignition point, it explodes. So I know the PCNG, spearheaded by Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi, is pushing the efforts of education and the conversion that is currently going on, but this will take some time. And we can't knock the populace from being afraid, but what we could do is, as we continue to tout the CNG, the benefits of CNG, everyone will see that it's a gas that Nigeria has, in terms of reserves, a lot of, and in terms of the economic viability, a good case for usage. And in terms of safety, once the education goes around, that it's a gas that can be adopted in replacement of the traditional fuels that we use for our vehicles and even for electricity generation.
Tell us, about the cost implications. What is the average cost implication for a regular, sedan car or a regular saloon car, beg your pardon, compared to petrol? What would be the cost implications to run a full tank of CNG, and how long would that last for a regular saloon vehicle?
So there are two cost implications, right? You first talk about the cost of the product. You mentioned when you're introducing this segment that CNG is sourced locally. There is some FX impact, but it's not as high as what you were seeing in the PMS on diesel, where we have to import the refined product. CNG is pretty much pipeline gas that is compressed. Pipeline gas meaning methane, which is all produced locally. And let me just quickly describe, the value chain or the supply chain of it, where the pipeline gas is now connected to something called a mother station, which is a compression plant, and that's where the compression takes place. And in terms of distribution to the populace, The mother station links over to the daughter stations through trucks, what people call virtual pipelines, to carry the gas over to the daughter stations. And then from the daughter stations, you feed into the cars. So in terms of cost, as the president mentioned, with the rising prices of petrol, which is well over 1,000 naira per liter, you can compare that with about 230 naira per liter per standard cubic meters of CNG. So, just do the math. If you're filling your car with 30 liters or, 40 liters, you could have significant savings compared to PMS. And in terms of the efficiency, in terms of the number of kilometers covered, CNG powered vehicles are slightly less, but comparatively equal to that of petrol. So you're looking at savings well over 50%. Now, the second cost to it, which is what we should, I think the government is looking to subsidize and drive demand stimulation, and that's the cost of installation. Now, the cost of installation covers the kits. A conversion kit will include a cylinder. So for the example you mentioned of a sedan car, you're looking about a 65 liter to 75 liter cylinder. And then the kit will also have an ECU, an electronic control unit, a fuel injector, a CNG line that will pass the CNG into the engine, and also a CNG filter. So all this, that is the bigger problem, in my opinion, in terms of driving mass adoption, because that's fairly expensive. We do not produce that locally, so we have to import the conversion kits. And of course, you see the FX impact with the rise of the dollar going up compared to the naira. So, but I must give kudos to the PCNG and the presidency in terms of driving demand stimulation. And let me highlight the word demand stimulation, because it's important to note that, at least from my experience and observing what they're doing, the government is not trying to replace the role of the private sector, but more so drive the demand by subsidizing the initial push of these CNG kits to commercial drivers, where right now a conversion process is going on where commercial drivers can actually go to one of the accredited sites picked by the PCNG initiative and convert their vehicles for free, all paid for by the government. That program is going on. So that is the cost that we have to monitor. And I'm sure when demand is increasing, Nigerians being innovative, Nigerians being very industrious, will figure out a way to start manufacturing some of these cylinders and kits locally. I'm sure backed by the government, as they're spending a lot of money, and that's most likely will be their plan.
All right, I'm really glad that you mentioned the possibility of Nigerians making the cylinders locally. There was an explosion of a CNG truck at Abeokuta. There was another one at Port Harcourt. And I want us to go back to the safety concerns again, because when we talk about the cylinder, I read one of the interviews where NIPCO had then said that the cylinder was not a standard cylinder, it was a fake cylinder. How do we guard against the possibility of, situations where there will be quote-unquote fake cylinders? You've mentioned how safe CNG is because it evaporates into the air, while with liquefied petrol, it sticks. But there are also the concerns of how these cylinders are going to be in the boots of cars. These cars will ply on roads that are bumpy, that are not properly, these roads, they have potholes. So should that also be something that should be considered? And also the possibility of these CNG stations, maybe being sold separately at the fuel station from the petrol station. Are these concerns that should be highlighted?
Absolutely, they should be highlighted, and actually they are being addressed by the SON. An article came out right after the incident happened where the SON mentioned the cause of the incident, like you rightly said, is because of a fake cylinder that was being used in place of the real CNG cylinder, which is extremely dangerous. Let's just run through some comparative numbers. A typical CNG cylinder is really thick. We're talking about 1.5 inches or more. This is actually the standard of a bulletproof glass or a bulletproof steel door. A typical CNG cylinder also is tested to contain a pressure of about 300 bar, while its working pressure is about 200 bar. Now, when we compare that to LPG cylinder, which by that article was the case where local people used LPG cylinder, or they tried to weld a cylinder in place of LPG cylinder in place of CNG. The LPG cylinder thickness is not as thick as a CNG cylinder. The LPG cylinder, in terms of pressure, can only handle about 7 bar working pressure. And in terms of testing, they test up to 30 bar, right? So based on those technicalities, you see the obvious difference. But I must implore Nigerians that we have to take a sense of ownership in our safety as well. And of course, as I mentioned earlier on the call, on this interview, that the government is driving this education. But let's also use some sort of common sense and research, because we are talking about a flammable product here. CNG gas is actually the safest gas when it compared to the other derivatives. But when you're using fake infrastructure, it can become very dangerous.
But is it also something to point out, apologies for jumping in, is it also something to point out, that I've seen people who say that they don't know how safe it is to convert cars that were originally built for petrol use to CNG. Is that also something to point out? And regardless of how much we talk about the Standards Organization of Nigeria, we all know what the reality is in Nigeria with the constant bypassing of safety procedures. And so, should that be a concern that people have, that cars which were originally built to use petrol will now be converted to CNG? Can we trust that?
Absolutely, yes, you can trust that. When we talk about the CNG conversions, you have about 3 types. You have the dedicated kits, where whatever car or vehicle you convert runs solely on CNG. You have the biofuel, where it can run on multiple fuel sources. And then you have the sequential, where even the kit through its ECU automatically changes from one fuel source to another. So these kits are designed, actually, if you're using a biofuel or sequential, they're designed to use multiple fuel sources. In our case, where Mesovest is converting in partnership with the PCNG, we convert petrol vehicles to not 100% CNG, but the conversion allows the vehicle to run both on petrol and CNG. Completely safe. These have been tested through international standards, and this is what SON is adopting as well. In terms of the reality that you spoke about, where things are bypassed, obviously I cannot speak for the monitoring process for the different organizations. Our hope is that they do their part, and from the approval of 88 standards, I'm guessing they will. But they are even taking it a step ahead, and they are working with the PCNGI in adopting I think the acronym is called NVGMS, that's Nigerian Vehicle Monitoring System, where kits that are converted, kits used in conversions in their accredited centers are monitored. They'll be able to monitor it in the different stations that you go convert your car. So there's a pairing that takes place when the car is being converted. And not only that, on that NVGMS, also a database is also going to be created with accredited suppliers of the CNG infrastructure, both the conversion kits and the cylinders. So these are steps that the government is taking in partnership with private companies like ours. But let's take it a step further, where we also, as a populace, have the responsibility to take safety as the #1 priority. Obviously, this comes with education. With you having interviews like this, this helps out a lot, so thank you. With the PCNGI driving the initiative as well, I think they're taking the right steps. Private companies that are in the CNG business, like ours, Mesovest, also take the right steps in terms of safety, which is key. But most importantly, individuals have the onus to play it safe, because their lives pretty much are in their hands when it comes to this. You cannot use an LPG cylinder or you try and weld a cylinder in place of CNG. The CNG gas component in the cylinder is at a very high pressure. We're talking about 200 bars. compared to LPG, which is about 7. So with education, I'm sure everybody will get it right, understand what they're working with, and take safety as their priority.
As quickly as you can, please. I want you to respond to the second part of the question I had asked earlier with regards to potholes, that are on the Nigerian roads. We don't have the best of roads yet. So is that a concern? And, how will this be addressed, as the citizens are not the ones that will fix the roads? So the cylinders being in their cars, riding through these potholes, really pose some form of a concern, for citizens. And also to talk about the new challenges that the cars will bring. Are the mechanics who currently deal with petrol-fueled cars, are they equipped enough to be able to deal with these challenges? Or will there be new measures that will be implemented in educating them in that regard?
Okay, so I'll address the potholes. Nobody likes potholes, right? Whether it's a petrol car, whether it's a CNG car or LPG car, potholes are not good for cars. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But however, having said that, on a lighter note, CNG cars in the process of conversion are actually, the cylinders are fixed in a frame that is secured in, whether it's in the boot or other parts of the car. So it actually does not move, right? It's very static. So whether there's any, bump you go over, the CNG cylinder is properly secured. So there's nothing to worry about that in terms of conversion, as long as you go to an accredited CNG conversion centers. Potholes will not be a problem. The conversion problems, the conversion process actually factors that by putting it in a frame. And please remind me your second question real quick.
So I was talking about the mechanics and, will it pose new challenges?
Yes. So to be honest with you, I see that as the bigger problem. So there are two key things I see here that the government has an uphill battle with. One of we mentioned earlier, which is the cost of the conversion itself, which I think they're doing a good job with the PCNGI in subsidizing. And hopefully when local content comes in place, we bring down the cost by producing locally. The second thing is this training. With mechanics converting, a lot of mechanics, even look at fixing cars right now, go to a roadside mechanic, you already have problems. And we've been using petrol-based cars, diesel-based cars for decades, right? So with a new technology, relatively new in terms of this scale of adoption, there's a lot of training that has to happen. The CNG conversion process is completely different from the mechanical process and electrical process of the engine. And what you see now is once you convert, you pretty much own the problems of the car.
All right.
So there's a stringent process of inspection and conversion.
Right.
So a lot of
we
training
need to
has
go.
to go to.
I think we've been able to X-ray every single part of it, of the conversation on CNG. If any new things come up, we would like to have you join us and speak with us. Will you be converting yourself?
I've converted my car. I've converted every of our employees' cars. We're converting with partnership with the PCNGI. Hopefully, we convert your car and your car as well.
Oh, we'll see.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for stopping by.